response video to 50 questions asked by Brett Keane. Yeah, well, it's probably a good idea, this whole question thing I was thinking about the other day. Just that whole personality test thing and whatever and different things, and you say, yeah, maybe it'd be really good if we could come up with 100 really good questions, or 50, and, based on the answers, just put people in categories, just put the people who answer the questions the same way in categories, and then we could even put a label on it like, holy shit, this guy's an asshole, or something. These people are. But it might be interesting to come up with questions that are, they always have to be answerable. There's so many questions in tests, and you say, well, wait a minute, that's just too, I have to qualify that answer. So it's framing a question well enough where the answer can be explicit. But I guess you could do that with multiple choice too. You could just have the choice of this question is too ambiguous, so people could just avoid the question. So anyway, I will try to add some comic relief. I don't know. I don't feel very funny. Well, I feel funny, but I don't feel humorous. Yeah, that's good. Anyway, question one. I'm going to read them because, why? I mean, I could let Brett read them in the video, but, Anyway, is there more to being an atheist than lack of belief in deities? Well, the strict definition of the word, I guess not, but yeah, there's a consequence to being an atheist. Okay, so I guess in that sense, quite obviously, if you're going to have any conclusion, any observed fact, if you're just going to observe the fact and not think it means anything whatsoever, like it has no consequence, well, that's kind of bogus. I mean, the fact that, like, frogs are green, okay, who cares? All right, it probably isn't too important. There's an explanation for it, but it doesn't really mean much. But the fact that there's no God, well, now, that opens a whole big door of, well, now, what do we do? Nobody made this thing. Nobody designed it. Would you go into a building that had no architect? That was just thrown together by a process? I mean, no, you wouldn't. So, I mean, it has a consequence, the fact that there's no deities. Why are we the only animal in evolution to come this far when it comes to our intelligence and qualia? I think he asked the same question later, to tell you the truth. Anyway, that's not a joke. Why are we? Because, well, qualia is a stupid fucking word. I don't have a funny answer to that. Because we tied the chicken to a tree, and so the chicken would have been the most intelligent, but we tied it to a tree. Something like that. Anyway, well, we are the only one because everything's always rare, and everything's in a process. So theoretically, somebody could argue that you have to build all this complexity to get to this thing. You can't have consciousness without complexity. So complexity had to be achieved first, a level of complexity. And one could argue, I suppose, that we didn't until recently in our evolutionary history was there enough complexity existing, let's say the mammalian brain, for this to be possible. You have to have the constituent complexity already existing, pre-existing. And that if you played this out long enough, other simians would end up in the same place as us, achieve language and achieve the ability to do all this abstract thinking. I'm going to argue that I think it was a really rare or unusual circumstance again. I think there's a lot of rare and unusual circumstances, a lot of perfect storms in our history, and we're the product of incalculably improbable circumstances. But anyway, the answer to the question is yeah, first you have to have the complexity, and we haven't had that long enough in the evolutionary history. But you could argue, like, dragonflies have been around a long time, very sophisticated, very complex organism. Why doesn't it go further? Why didn't it take any further steps? Why did it just stay pretty much the same machine for 300 million years? Because evolution does like things that work, that function. And the functionality has to be just consumption and reproduction in some sort of balanced, long-term survival interest kind of mechanism. There's no real interest in giving something high intelligence, and I don't think nature, if nature had a brain and was calculating in some sort of serious way how to make good survival machines, the last thing it would do is give its survival machines nuclear bombs. So intelligence is high intelligence is a nature breaker, not a nature player. So it's not even in the long-term interest, survival interest of an organism to be too smart for the game. And having intelligence makes you too smart for nature's game. That's a long answer. I gotta do better than that. What does art mean to you? Your view, not dictionary. Yeah, it's been a broken word for a long time. Art used to mean having a skill set that made you capable of, duplicating, rendering reality with distortions or without. But basically, it was an artist was somebody who had a skill set, a capacity to render reality in some form, whether it be, poetry or book or some other form. It's a rendering, an interpretation, a performance, a construction, and so they're builders of a perception, a conception that moves people. You could call that an artist. Yeah, it's sort of migrated now. It's not really so much connected to skill set. It's connected to creativity and imagination and a lot of other things. So it's kind of a word like love that doesn't mean a hell of a lot anymore. Why do colors bother some but appeal to others? Well, it's conditioning. I mean, you grow up in a circumstance and, just the wrong thing happens on the wrong day. The day that you stub your toe or break your toe even is the same day that, your Aunt Martha shows up in a blue dress, and you end up associating blue with the pain of a broken toe, and so you're fucked for life. Why did racism begin? Well, it's biology. I mean, again, this is part of the selfish gene kind of thing. So your new genes, say you have some genetic change that takes place in some small population, while the old genes have affiliation maybe with some other relative, some distant relative. The new genes are new, and they don't want to get polluted out of existence. So there's a mechanical interest in the long term for there to be genetic preservation of uniqueness. So there's going to be a tendency not to want to pollute your uniqueness. Yeah, so you'd see that as being part of the genetic mechanism. That there'd be an interest for new genes to be able to survive. They need to be able to stave off pollution. So I guess that's why there's a tendency toward affiliation. And there's other incentives that are exactly the opposite in terms of having more diversity to create more variation. So it's a balance, and sometimes the balance tips 60-40, sometimes the balance tips 40-60. But that's the genetic function of it, I would argue. Can torture be justified in any circumstances? Well, I guess you have to answer yes, but I mean, they got to be one hell of a circumstance. I mean, the circumstance can't be something like, I can't find my bubble gum, I think you stole it, so I'm going to torture you. Yeah, that's bullshit. What is the difference between murder and killing? Well, I guess it would be intent. You can kill a lot of things, a lot of ways. You can end something's life. But murder is, deliberately intending to end something's existence. And it's usually malicious, so you can just put the am and think about malicious. Murder is malicious. Killing could be, mercy killing. Could be a nice thing. Is any sex considered unnatural or wrong? Please elaborate. Is any sex considered unnatural or wrong? Well, women are always wrong. There's a joke. Misogynist joke. Yeah, well, if you mean a kind of sexual activity, well, yeah. I mean, unnatural is an impossible word to deal with because obviously everything technically is natural. We're part of a deterministic universe. We're part of the thing, so anything that we can manifest is natural. But if you mean natural outside of the realm of human pollution, which is another way of looking at natural. Natural would be anything that's not made by man or not tainted by man. That would be what most people use the word natural to describe things that human beings haven't fucked up. And obviously we've fucked up sex. But yeah, nature creates all kinds of sexual deviance. So we can be perverted in our conditioning quite easily. To say it's natural, well, does it conform to the norms? No. There's lots of deviant sex. And is deviant sex good? Well, maybe, maybe not. It depends on the circumstance. So wrong is a tricky word. Wrong what? Evolutionarily? Wrong in terms of being not likely to be mutually gratifying, like rape or something. So yeah, I don't know. Not enough of a question there. What does freedom of expression and speech mean? It doesn't mean anything in America anymore. It certainly doesn't mean anything in pop culture, corporation-controlled media. But yeah, I mean, the basic nature of it should mean that words and gestures are not an imposing violence, and a person should be able to make their words and gestures available to other people to view if they choose. So that should be our freedom. Our freedom should be to say the government sucks. We should be able to be free to say, I hope Obama's brain gets eaten by, you know, I don't know, extraterrestrial maggots. We should be free to say we hate. We should be able to free to say whatever we want. We should be able to rub anything we want. We should be able to whack anything we want. We should be able to do anything we want as long as we don't step on somebody else's space in doing it. And so, yeah, it should be accessible, but not in somebody else's face. And so that tricky line is, unfortunately, we live in a society where everybody's not an adult and everybody can't choose not to see your bullshit. So if they're stuck on a bus, I mean, you know, if they don't want to see your junk, they shouldn't have to see your junk. So your freedom to express your junk is not, has to have a limit on it. So there's no, the point would be is to protect the freedom as, to give it the benefit of the doubt. So unless the harm is something real, it shouldn't be suppressed. And if there's no other way for the freedom to be provided than to offend other people, well, the freedom should come first. But there's always mechanisms, like you can have places where people can be, where they do their protesting, and people can go watch the protest if they wish, that kind of thing, where it isn't in people's faces. Should prostitution be legalized? Well, you know, I suppose the criminalization in silly ways where, yeah, you manipulate the psychology of people is troublesome. So yeah, I mean, prostitution for 13-year-olds should be illegal. Adults should be able to make choices, contracts, as they choose, but there has to be provision too to protect people who have assumed that they're in legally binding contracts that oblige their partner not to go pick up, you know, herpes at the local hookery. What is anarchy? Well, it's nothing. It's the absence of anything. And obviously the absence of a blueprint for a building is a disaster. Obviously a plan for where you want your road to go is stupid. So, I mean, the absence of design is stupid. And anarchy is just the absence of design, the absence of system design. Stupid. If you could go back in time and kill Adolf Hitler, would you do so? Yeah, it's probably got to be a win. So I would do it. I'd be concerned that I'm going to do something to mess things up even more. But if you consider 50 million, or you go with the low number in terms of how many people were killed or harmed in World War II, and that Hitler facilitated that whole thing pretty much. You could pretty much argue that the war with Japan wouldn't happen without Hitler. The whole thing is Hitler. So, you know, you got 50 million people, 2 nuclear bombs dropped. Yeah, it's probably a good idea to kill the fucker. We probably weren't going to do it worse than Adolf Hitler. Do you think any race is better than another? Do I think any race is better than another? They're different. People are physically different. So they're probably, on average, taller, or they have longer parts, or bigger parts, or fatter parts, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. Better is a stupid word. Gee. You know, I mean, you could rephrase that question in a lot of different ways and get a subtly different answer. Is race a fucking pain in the ass? Yeah. Would it be really nice if we didn't have race? Yeah, in my opinion. The diversity doesn't do us much good, because it just creates this opportunity for conflict, the opportunity to build a border, to segregate. So, yeah. You know, I mean, but yeah, I don't know what to say. It sucks. Maybe we should just put all the races in a hat and pick one and say they get to survive and the rest have to, you know, slowly wind out. What is the most painful thing you've ever endured? Oh, crap. Well, it had to be a broken tooth. Yeah, I mean, I almost jumped in front of traffic. It was so bad. Have you ever wanted to die? Well, yes, I have many times. Yeah, come on, yeah, I mean, all over the place. Do you think people who commit suicide are dishonorable or weak? Oh, whatever. There certainly could be dishonorable. They could be committing suicide because, you know, they just got caught molesting kids or something. But do I think the act of suicide is dishonorable? Of course not. Do I think it's a sign of weakness? Well, obviously not. It takes courage to kill yourself. And so, yeah, whatever. Explain consciousness. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. It's a long explanation. It's just about how our brain creates the illusion of consciousness. But it's an illusion created inside our neural network, where our brain hardware basically creates a projector that puts feelings into our scope, and then our vision, it puts a feeling in, you know, like a sixth sense. It dumps feelings in front of us, and now we can react to the feelings. So it feeds back feelings as a sixth sense into our sense network, and voila, we're conscious, and now we can react to the feelings. And our brain can try strategies, and it can remember, and it can do lots of other things that dump more and more feelings into our focus, our sense focus. And so I guess that would be what consciousness is. Have you ever enjoyed hurting anyone or fantasize about it? Well, certainly I fantasize about it. But yeah, hurting somebody in real life is not pleasurable. Would you kill strangers for profit and government? Would you kill strangers for profit and government? That's really badly written. Would I kill, like in a war or something? Yeah, no, I mean, it depends. I might kill my own fellow soldiers in the right circumstance. So, yeah, I'm not opposed to killing, but yeah, I'm going to make sure I'm killing the right guy. And I'll do it because I think it's the right thing to do. I won't do it because for a government or for a profit or for something. I'll do it because it's either right or it's wrong. I mean, I'll do it because it's right and that it needs to get done. Can the Big Bang repeat itself? Well, whatever. My opinion is as useless as anybody else's on that question. I mean, the simple answer, because it's a can question, is it possible? Certainly it's possible. What is your view on gambling? I hate it. I think it's a horrible. It just consumes. It just wastes people's life. And it's one of these things that just takes advantage of our addictive psychology and our our hopeful psychology and our wishful psychology. And so like a lot of other vice, these aren't vice for a bad reason. This is vice for a good reason, because it's corrosive. And yes, some people can play with it and not get hurt, but so many people it causes so much harm to. And it's so hard for those people who are harmable to know how harmable they are. You know, so there's no real way to segregate those two people beforehand. Who's going to get addicted and who's not going to get addicted. It's almost impossible to draw that line beforehand. That it's just, why play with it? I'd rather the human race didn't play with it. Do you like yourself? If so, why? Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I mean, I'm a perfectionist, so I would like myself to be a hell of a lot better. But compared to what, right? So if I'm doing a relative comparison, I like myself pretty good. I hate the average human. The average human, I completely despise. Make a composite of the average human, and God, he sucks so bad. So yeah, compared to that asshole, I really love myself. But you know, compared to something better, yeah, then my like for myself diminishes. What does justice mean to you? Well, that's a tricky one, ain't it? Justice is another weird word. Just desert, just penalty, just... I mean, justice, you can't compensate for something that's broken. All you can do is do the most effective thing possible as a reaction to, say, a harm or an unfairness. So there's been, like, say there's a rule violation in the game. They can't go back to before the rule violation. They can't really undo it. So, you know, because you might have done damage to somebody. They got a broken shin, or they got a cut, or they got some other injury, and you can't undo the injury that's been created by the foul. Yeah, I guess in some cases they can. And so that's all you're trying to do, though, is you're just trying to find the best way possible to restore the circumstance to what it was beforehand. So in some cases what you're trying to do is just create the value, some kind of value to compensate for the value lost. So if some little girl is brutalized and harmed and murdered, justice won't be in punishing the guy who did it, because that's just creating more pain. You can't undo what happened to her, but what you can do is create law that might prevent some other little girl from getting abused, and there'll be value in creating deterrence or prevention, so nobody else has to suffer what that girl suffered. So justice is learning. Justice is preventing. Justice is a lot of things. Justice is just replacing the negative with some sort of positive value. And if you can, justice would be undoing the harm. But like I said, in some cases you just can't undo it. What is love? A four-letter word. The nastiest of all of them. Yeah, it's an undefined pile of shit, so it doesn't mean... I can't do anything. You have to be more specific. What is attachment? What is addiction? What is lust? These are questions I can answer, but I can't answer. Love is yeah, I can answer it. It's a stupid, idiotic word that people use as a placeholder. Just almost like the word life. It's a fake word, because what people put in the same category as living is very different. My cells that make up my body are alive. I technically am not alive. I'm not a living thing. Okay, I don't have a cellular membrane and a nucleus. Okay, my individual cells have that. They're living. So I mean, that's the bizarreness of these words, is they're just useless words, because they're covering way too much territory. Everybody has a different definition of the word love. So to say what is love, well, there's no point, because love is a stupid, idiotic, no, I won't say that. Love is just a individually defined word, so it just doesn't have any value as a word. Yeah, it's a useless word. So, up to 25, we'll take a break here. Do you trust the media? Well, you know, sometimes, I guess you could argue, when it's in their interest to tell the truth, but they have a lot of other interests, so there's times when you always have to scrutinize. Is this one of those things where they have an interest or an advantage in creating hype, or, you know, exaggerating, or blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, that's what you've got to measure. But media in general gets very complicated because the word media covers both news and entertainment, and that's where it all gets, you know, in education. So these are all media, and each one functions very differently. So, but yeah, I don't trust producers in general, because producers in general usually have some self-interest they're serving rather than my interest. Alright, so we'll do the other 25 in future and such. Maybe instantaneously, but no, I'll cut you a break. Cut it into 2 pieces. So, thank you very much. Maybe I'll be funnier next time. Yeah, I wasn't very funny. I wasn't even very articulate. I'm really tired. It's, you know, it's the middle of the day. I gotta do a lot better than this.